Okay, now we got to start preparing the Bitfusion client. Before you do that, we need to make sure that the Bitfusion server is installed correctly and integrated to the vSphere client onto the vSphere vCenter. So how do you verify that? Click on the menu in your vSphere client, make sure Bitfusion options is there, or right click on any of your machine. You will see that the context menu should have Bitfusion options, right? And once you have prepared your virtual machine, either on a CentOS or Ubuntu or Red Hat, go into the edit settings. Make sure that if you want to, make sure your network adapter is on VMX 3. That's one. The requirement is actually on the VM options. Under your VMware tools, make sure your VMware tools is already installed. Running VMware tool scripts, it must have all the 4 checks here, right? So once this is done, you are actually pretty well good to go. So we actually uploaded the agent right into our client. So without further ado, I have already put it into my machine here, and I'm just going to show you that I already transferred the file into the Bitfusion client machine. So we gotta just make sure that the Bitfusion, so in my case, my Bitfusion client is connected to the internet. So we can actually install the dependency uh, that is required to install the Bitfusion client. So we can actually do a check on the query out to see what are the dependency, and then first and foremost, I just want to show you that without all this installed, we will not be able to install the Bitfusion client. So you have to make sure that all these are actually installed. All right. Okay. So I'm just going to get a copy of that. So now I'm just going to show you that if we were to try to install this, right, you will see that it will fail because of the dependency are not actually installed. Okay. So we just have to install all this dependency. So I'm going to just choose every single thing that I see here, and we'll go through this quickly. Okay, so you see some of the dependency has more dependency. So we were just gonna do following what's actually been written here, so that you can actually fix it up, right? And answer yes. So the client will actually download the remaining requirement and install everything into the machine. Okay, we are done here. So now we can actually do an install of the Bitfusion client. And you can see that it's now successful installed. So to make sure that the Bitfusion is client installed correctly, we just run the command and you can see that it's actually now running correctly. So once this is completed, we need to actually shut down the machine. Okay. So why do we need to shut down the machine? Because we need to enable the plugin on the machine once it's shut down. And what we got to do here is to enable the Bitfusion plugin in this case, right? So in this case, we are doing for the client, we'll choose the client. Server will be for the second server and above. So because you don't need to register the plugin anymore, it's already registered when you deploy the first server. So we just have to just enable it. So once it is enabled, some configuration has actually been done. Then now we will actually power up the machine once again. Okay, so let's just make sure everything is running correctly. Alright. So if you do a groups, you can see that which are the group that my user that I'm using to log in into the client, right? So we were supposed to, before we can start consuming as a client, we just need to give him some rights, right? So we are supposed to actually add the user, all right, into the Bitfusion groups. So let's just list the groups that's actually inside this Ubuntu server. So you can see Bitfusion is also inside here, all right. So let's just add the user into the Bitfusion group, all right. Okay, you can see that now I'm inside the user group. So we will be able to just to make sure that we got the rights correctly. So all we need to do is to run Bitfusion list GPUs. Right, it's still having an error reading the file. Normally what we can do is without adding to the group, you technically will have to use a sudo to run that. Okay, once you are added to the group, technically you'll be able to run that. So you see, I'm now able to run it natively without having to use the word sudo now. You just have to wait for a moment to get this done correctly. Alright, so if you go to the Bitfusion page, we'll be able to see our client here. Alright, we have not run anything there at the current moment, so you're not going to see any data point at this junction. Bitfusion client setup is complete. Right, so we already see that we can list the GPU, so there's just one more thing that we might just want to do is to limit the open file settings, right? Typically, you might at least set it to 2096 as the minimum or unlimited, depending on your requirement. And that's all to actually prepare for your Bitfusion client.